Welcome to Eric Hates Games. This is a talk show about games. The people who play them, the people who make them, and everything in between. Each week, we pick a topic and discuss. There will be tangents, there will be disagreements, but most of all, there will be games. If you have an idea for an episode, or if you have questions you'd like answered by our esteemed gaming experts, please send an email to @gmail.com. This episode, let's square off in one of the most heated debates in competitive gaming. My name is Eric, and I love eSports. So, let's start off by just talking about what is a sport, because I think that'll give us a good baseline to talk about the big question inside and outside of competitive gaming, which is, are esports real sports? Okay, so what is a sport in your view, Adam?
Sports honestly just really any game played competitively, really.
Okay.
That's just me.
A game that is played competitively. And do we have a working definition for games, Charles? Like, what's a game?
Yeah, dictionary, we could always look in there. I mean, a game could be defined as a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I mean, something that has a winner and a loser.
Okay, so an objective.
Objective.
Players.
Goal, yes.
And rules.
And rules.
That's usually how we encapsulate games, right? We have players that are playing them, we have rules by which they are playing, and we have objectives for which they are competing or going for, right? And if we're talking about Pac-Man, the objective is to get as many points as you can without losing. Mm-hmm. Okay, and if we're talking about football, the objective is to get the ball to the end of the field as much as you can. And now, a definition of sports from our Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary. Okay, if you've ever heard of David Foster Wallace, he's written a nice essay about how political these here definition books can be, so we can't really trust them, but let's do it anyway. So sport we see here is a physical activity engaged in for pleasure, or a particular activity so engaged in for challenge. Okay? So, what do we take from that? Does society think of sports any way differently than that definition?
I feel like they do see it as a very physical, very hardship-based thing. Two long away from two guys playing baseball a lot because it's fun.
Okay, so man, a couple things to unpack there. One is physicality. You mentioned sports having to be physical, and I think I agree with you that a lot of people, when they think of sports, they think must be physical. And then the other thing you mentioned is fun, right? And so some idea that playing sports is you're not really playing for fun.
Yeah.
Right? What are you playing for then, in your opinion?
Satisfaction. I want to win a major. Yay. Winning. The feel of winning is unlike anything else, and I feel like that's one of the sole reasons that I compete.
For winning?
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that sounds like sports to me, and sports contests, right? Like, you want to be the winner, and that's what competition is. Do you ever compete in anything, Charles?
Every time I go to a con once in a while, Smash Bros. I haven't done an Ultimate Tourney yet, but Mario Kart 8 or Smash 4.
Okay.
Back in the day. By that I mean 2 years ago.
Any traditional competitions, sports growing up, high school, things like that?
You act like any of us were ever in shape.
I was in A shape. Not a good one, but A shape nonetheless.
Adam, did you play any sports growing up or in high school?
Yeah, in high school I played street hockey.
Okay.
And it was a ton of fun. I loved it.
You played street hockey?
Yeah.
Okay, was that a sanctioned event, or was it a bunch of people who showed up and hit a ball with sticks?
A little bit of both.
Okay. How about yourself, Jordan? Anything?
I played a lot of baseball, and I was on the basketball team, but I was the worst kid on the team. I was a chubby basketball guy, so yeah, baseball was more fun. So.
Okay. What role did you play on the basketball team, if I might ask?
Bench warmer until until they put me on the wing. So.
Okay, wing. Now, we're going off on a little bit of a tangent, but you are someone who's played games competitively, correct?
Yes.
Now, could you find any parallels between playing baseball? What position do you play in baseball?
I played catcher, and sometimes they'll put me in right field.
Okay, catcher or right field. A lot of downtime. Literally, as a catcher, you're down. But can you find any parallels between competing in the games that you compete in now and competing in a baseball game?
There's strategy. There's a lot of ways to approach what you want to do. When you look at a basketball game, there's a million ways to approach the rim as a point guard.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, when you look at a fighting game, there is a million ways to approach your opponent. And the same thing with baseball. There's a lot of ways to throw the ball. There's a lot of ways to hit the ball. A lot of ways to catch the ball.
Mm.
It's a little more stationary, but, in that, I believe that the strategies and the thinking and the branches and situation training all remain the same.
Situation training, I like this. Sounds like a real competitor talking about sports. This is awesome. So our next big topic is why watch sports? Why does anyone watch sports for any reason? Adam, what do you think?
Couple reasons. Some to just watch people do stuff that they would never be able to do. Some get invested in different things. Like, I know WWE is really popular because people get invested in the stories of the characters. Mm-hmm. And it's all, like, silly stuff, but it's entertaining nonetheless. Mm-hmm. And people get invested in it. So those are two reasons. Entertainment's a big one.
So entertainment, and then also this dream, this idolatry.
Yes.
That you are looking at someone that is the same species as you.
Mm-hmm.
But they are throwing a ball at 100 miles an hour, in a very confined space.
Yeah.
Or
just seeing, like, what the peak of the species can do, basically.
Yeah, what the best of our best can do. Mm-hmm. That's pretty deep, I would say. And we have precedent of that existing back into the Olympics, right? Mm-hmm. And when we talk about eSports, if we go back to more digital sports watching, Korea has a relatively long history of watching eSports, and so there are large arenas that were packed with people playing games called StarCraft in the mid-90s. Okay, and StarCraft was one of the first big eSports, meaning players would play 1v1 or 2v2, and everyone else in the arena would watch those players up on a stage, clicking their mouses and typing their keyboards and doing hotkeys and stuff like that. And then just as a separate example, currently there's an arena in Beijing called the Bird's Nest Arena that has around 40,000 seats in it. So 40,000 people can pack this arena, and they do, to watch games like, League of Legends, or Dota, or anything like that.
Overwatch especially.
Overwatch is big too in China, yeah. So, bit of history in games as sports. Go, which Go is one of the 4 arts of the Chinese scholar. Okay, so it's the 4 arts were stringed instrument, calligraphy, painting, and playing Go. Okay, this is a board game that, in order to move usually up in the caste system, you had to be good at Go. So already we had competitive gameplay with this here board game. And then we also had things like the Olympics. Obviously, the ancient Greeks gave us the Olympics, watching the best people do things. But are any of you familiar with Twin Galaxies?
Yes.
And high score chasing?
I am not. He is.
Okay. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Twin Galaxies?
So Twin Galaxies was a very, very famous arcade, and I think they own a website now, where you basically submit your high scores for old school arcade games, and they're always striving to see who is the most perfect, best, and gets the highest scores. And they had a lot of score chasers in their arcades.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was extremely popular in the 80s. As arcades were popular in the 80s, people would literally show up to the Twin Galaxies arcade every once in a while and compete in Donkey Kong or Pac-Man, right? And we have maybe one of the first e-athletes in Billy Mitchell, Charles's favorite e-athlete. Can you tell us a little bit about Billy?
I'm not gonna act like I know like specific stats, but he had for the longest time, he had the highest score in Donkey Kong.
Mm-hmm.
He's a cheater.
He's allegedly a cheater, but yeah. So we have sports scandals, right? And he actually completed the first perfect game of Pac-Man. And the perfect game of Pac-Man is getting every single pellet, obviously. Every time you get one of the power pellets, you eat every single ghost. You get every fruit, and of course you don't die. And that has been completed by a total of 6 people.
Yep.
6 people have completed a perfect Pac-Man game. Versus one of my other favorite examples, which is summiting Mount Everest, which has been done by over 7,500 people to date. So if we want to talk about stretching our species and stretching what they can do, Everest is usually like, hey, there's the biggest mountain, go climb it. But the perfect game of Pac-Man
is a more monumental moment in human history.
But I would say it's potentially more difficult if you look at the numbers. So it's also an endurance race when we talk about arcade games, right?
Yeah.
You have to stand there for hours and hours and hours, if not days, just being aware.
Well, in Japan, it takes 100 yen. It takes 100 yen to make your legend. They don't have consoles like us. You don't have to spend a couple $100 on a setup. It takes 1 quarter to make your legend, and you want to see it as far and long and stretch out as far as you could possibly go with that 1 quarter. And some people will go broke going with that 1 quarter over and over. I want to see how long I can win. Some people can go for 5. Some people can go for 20. Some people will go for Daigo's 50.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, this is like playing a fighting game in an arcade.
Yes.
With 1 credit.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and that I was talking to someone about that recently, how arcade games, how they're so difficult, becomes like a cost-benefit analysis for the player. You want to get good so you don't get broke, right?
Yeah.
So you're competing with the game there. But we are going to take a break, and we'll be back with more exhaustive definitions and wild claims after this.
Capcom presents Capcom Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
back, here to talk about eSports and whether or not they are real sports. So, fortunately, we have an eSports competitor on set with us today in Jordan. So, Jordan, one thing I want to talk about that often gets brought up with this whole amazing discussion is money.
Yeah.
Okay, and how much money do eSports athletes make, and how do they make it? So can you take us through some of that?
All right. So first, you're gonna need a game. The game can be anything. The game can be Tekken 4. The game can be like really old games. Like I've seen some crazy people play old games like Capcom versus SNK, Marvel versus Capcom 2, and they travel the country. And I met a guy. I don't think his tag is Kukai. Tags are our alternate personas. What we use in game. Mine is Tempest. There's a couple billion, tags, and you could be anything. I know right now, infamously, Trident isn't used, and I try to get a friend to use it, and he didn't want to use it. So like, you gotta be good. You gotta pick a game, and the game just so happens to have a community. So like, the community could be like, I don't know. The community could be like, that's a hard one. That's a real hard one. Like,
We'll say Smash Bros.
we'll say Smash.
Okay.
We live in the strongest state for Smash Brothers.
Okay.
Some of the best, this is really some of the very best players. The best player in the United States lives here. One of the best players of all time lives here. Mewtwo King, who was one of the most legendary Smash players, who was the best at both Brawl and Melee at the same time. You have to, you have a lot of the greatest players living here.
Okay.
And
let's talk dollars. Let's talk dollars and cents. What are they making? How are they making it? Is this a viable career choice for my, 15-year-old budding person? Should I stop him from tennis lessons and get him in Smash lessons?
All right. Well, I'll stop tangenting here. Okay, so you got your game. Let's just say it's Smash like I started.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you got to find tournaments. Now, these tournaments, if 30 people show up, I'd say they pay $10 a piece. That's $300 pot bonus.
Okay.
Now, I could. The only one reference I have is Smash Summit, which Squad Strike was 60, 30, 10. First place takes 60% of the pot. Second place takes 30% of the pot. Third place takes 10% of the pot. And then there's monthlies, which top 8 gets paid out. So, like, first place takes majority. Second place takes smaller, more majority. Third place takes a little more majority. And then I think fifth, it goes 5, 5, 7, 7, which are the people who respectively made 7th place and 5th place. And there's after top 8, I don't think there's one above the other. They both lost at the same point. You get to take home that type of money, and some people typically put it back into the game. Some people make it as a living. I personally know a person, and I don't know if this is what he does, but he shows up everywhere. For the beginning of Ultimate, he showed up at every tournament, every nook and cranny, won it, left.
Really?
And yes, he was thorough too. Like, I was at a random like, it was my first ever like serious tournament. And he was there. And I went to this random monthly, and it turns out that he was there. And I went to a couple of random locals. It turns out he was there, and he won. And he just kept winning. And he was the person who taught me that Palutena was really good at Ultimate, because he's been a Palu main since she's been released, which is nuts. That is insane.
How much do you think this person made over the time that he's played Ultimate alone?
He's in Tri-State with like peak numbers. He's probably taking home about $200 a day.
$200 a day.
By showing up to a tournament at 5 or 7, warming up a little bit, playing, winning, leaving.
Okay.
And eventually you get so good that people, all these little tournaments, high tournaments, big tournaments, they have eyes. Stream setup. What are your results? What you did? Smash.gg. You look up my name and Smash.gg, and you can see all my 0-2 results of me thinking I could just walk in and win.
So, in other like similar situations. So like a lot of people starting out, is it viable? Not particularly, I'd say, because if you win, you can get a good chunk of money, but you have to win, being the caveat.
Yeah.
So like international tournament for Dota 2, the first place took home $16 million, and League of Legends world's first place individual, whoever that was, took home $2.2 million.
Yeah.
So if you win the really big tournaments, you can get a lot of money, but you have to be really, really good, and that takes practice and dedication.
Right, and just to put that into context, the TI has been going on for a bunch of years, the international, and it's arguably the biggest esports tournament every year. So the top team is a team of 5 people who are taking home around 16 million. So they're taking home more than 3 million each person, and that is, in comparison, more than Novak Djokovic took home for winning Wimbledon this year. So the big, you're right, you have to win, and you have to win on the big stages. But the big stages are starting to butt up against the typical sports purses that we see. And in some cases, like in tennis, which is famously pretty low for their purses, it's exceeding. But again, that's an annual tournament versus tennis has the 4 Grand Slams every year. And then Zero, can you tell us a little bit about Zero?
So Zero is my personal idol. He is a Smash Brothers player, and the thing is interesting. When I read his full story, it was just like, damn, he took a risk. He was a Chilean player who was the best in Chile for Smash Brothers Brawl, and not only you have to deal with being the best, but people don't like you because you're winning.
Yeah.
And it really sucks because being the best in the world absolutely sucks. But that's not what we're talking about. So Zero comes to the United States. People thought that Zero was just some dude that was abusing a cheap strategy. But then he kept winning and winning and winning and winning. And then the game nerfed his character. He kept winning and going and going. And it turns out that this guy was just a monster at the game. And he had a 56 tournament win streak.
Wow.
And compared to the league guys, compared to what you would make at one like major tournament now, he only made $45,000 for 57 majors, which nowadays is completely different because of him, he basically flooded all these players that wanted to be like him, and I wanted to be like him. So I started the new game thinking, oh, I'll be the best. I got my butt handed to me for, I'm going to say, a good latter half of a year. And then, these games, I don't say, you can't pick up a controller, be a Joe, go to EVO, which is the mecca of all fighting games. This tournament is, you want to prove yourself, you want to be the best in the world for your game, for the time, well, guess what? You got to go to EVO and win. And that's what everybody will probably tell you, unless you're Smash and you have power rankings. But that's not, yeah. So, for EVO, personally, I practiced a lot. And the prize bonus for Samurai Showdown was like $30,000 alone. So that pales in comparison to someone like Zero's winnings.
Sure.
So the market is so incredibly like saturated now with these games that there's like a dozen games at EVO that like people are watching. I think they did 9 games plus there's 3 side events that got a lot of views. Now these games had massive money behind them while Zero didn't. But to be the best, to get to first place, to get to that point, I practiced. Mind you, there was 3 sets of pools to get to the top 32. I made it past the first set of pools and got destroyed. I got absolutely destroyed. It was to the point where like I had to question in Smash Brothers. I had to question why I was playing because I was just like, I was sitting there. I was just like, I just lost to a Rob player. Why?
So how much did you practice, would you say?
So I went to 15 locals. I went to 4 monthlies. I went to 1 whole major. Don't recommend it. Don't go to a major trying to practice. But, I went to a major. So let's talk about how I practiced at the major. I got there at 12 the day before. and I practice till 6 in the morning the next day.
And this is against people of similar skill or potentially better skill than you.
Oh, way better skill.
Right? Iron sharpening iron?
I practiced against Justin Wong, who is the greatest fighting game player of all time.
Okay.
I played against Chris G, which is still pretty much one of the greatest fighting game players of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I played against some of the very best of Smash overnight, and I just sat there for hours, played the same. I'm gonna say the same 3 games, and just kept going. And you got to practice everything. You got to practice tech skill. You got to be on point. You got to situation training again. Know what to do when X, Y, and Z situation happens. So, Falcon Punch, that's really bad move, really slow.
Yeah.
But if you catch your opponent in a roll while they're landing and they think that they can get away from it and you reverse it and you hit them, that's a situation. But that's not the optimal situation. You can just tomahawk land forward smash, and that would have killed them anyways.
Tomahawk forward smash gets them every time.
Yes. Tomahawking is the strategy where you just jump and you fast fall straight to the ground and you do an option. And it's a mix-up. It's a common mix-up that people do against opponents. And it sounds really fancy, but in reality it's just jumping and landing and doing nothing. And your opponent will react to whatever you did while you're jumping last.
Sure. I'm gonna break real quick because we're getting into specific strategies within games that have a lot of jargon and prior knowledge required to understand them. But it's very clear that you play at a high level in many of these games. But let's just take an overarching view of popular genres of games that are competitive and popular games within those genres. So Charles, what are some popular genres of competitive games?
I mean, right now, MOBAs, FPS, fighting games like he just said.
Yeah.
Those are probably the 3 big main ones. Card games, too, are pretty big.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and card games have been competitive for quite a while. Magic the Gathering comes out in around 94, and there's always been a competitive scene for Magic the Gathering. There still is, and that game's a little weird because it's based on how much money you spend to get cards, and it's also pre-constructed, which is a little questionable. But MOBAs like Dota, that's what the international is. League of Legends, very, very popular. Fighting games, as you mentioned, Smash Brothers, Street Fighter, Tekken, always at EVO every year. Card games, Magic the Gathering, Hearthstone. First-person shooter games like Blizzard has a fully committed Overwatch League for their first-person shooter Overwatch. And then even some Battle Royale games are getting the competitive treatment, where we recently saw the Fortnite Worlds tournament happen, and the champion of that took home around $3 million. We discussed in a prior episode about speedrunning as a competitive art form, but yeah, Jordan, can you tell us a little bit about why, just in a sentence or two, why you chose to pursue fighting or fighting games or competitive play?
I dropped all responsibility of all the things I was doing. I still have a job, don't worry.
Yeah.
But I dropped everything because at the time I wanted to be the best in the world, and I still do. So in doing that, I just went after something that I really, really love to do. And, I just went after it, and I kept going, and eventually it ended up well for me. But, it could end up better for you or somebody else if you just chase your passion. So.
And I think that's a pretty good way to say it's going to be a wrap for this episode. And today's real life advice is follow your passion. Thank you.